I want you to imagine, just for a moment, an unprecedented gathering.
Okay.
We are talking about a massive theological summit. You have the most influential religious leaders of the modern age all sitting together on one stage.
Oh.
Yeah, there are pastors of 30,000 member megachurches, Catholic cardinals in full vestments, and, these brilliant, highly credentialed theologians.
Right, the heavy hitters.
Exactly. And they are all seated beneath this enormous illuminated cross, entirely prepared to defend and discuss 2,000 years of Christian doctrine with a packed audience.
Sounds intense.
It is. They're waiting for this profound, high-level religious dialogue. And then suddenly, Jesus of Nazareth walks into the room.
Oh, wow.
Right, and he doesn't have a halo. There is no supernatural light show. He just walks quietly onto the stage in plain clothes.
Just a guy.
Just a guy. He looks at the cross, he looks at the leaders, and then he looks out at the audience and says something that just completely shatters the air in the room.
I can only imagine.
He says, "I never said that I was God."
Man, that is the ultimate record scratch moment, isn't it?
It really is.
You can practically feel the oxygen leave the room in this scenario. I mean, it is a highly provocative image that strikes directly at the foundation of a 2-millennial-old institution.
Yeah, it forces everyone to just stop.
Exactly. It forces every single person in that room to instantly reevaluate the core premise of their faith.
And that incredibly tense, kind of unsettling scenario is the starting point for today's deep dive.
Right.
We are exploring this really thought-provoking philosophical text based on an imaginary conversation. It's crafted to explore the ideas of author and spiritual critic Jim Palmer.
A fascinating source to dig into.
For sure. So the mission for our deep dive today is to really sit with Palmer's massive what-if scenario.
Big question.
What if Jesus' purpose was never to convince the world of his exclusive divinity?
Which completely flips the script.
It really does. What if, according to this perspective, his life was meant to demonstrate what any human being could become through complete trust in God? We are going to explore how Palmer suggests this single shift in perspective just cascades outward, challenging established doctrines, modern worship practices, institutional power, and the very definition of who actually gets to belong to God.
And I think it is crucial to frame this right out of the gate for you, the listener.
Yeah, definitely.
This text, this whole thought experiment, is presented by Palmer not as a malicious attack on faith.
No, not at all.
Right. It's meant as an invitation to examine how beliefs shape human behavior. The source material is really just asking the reader to consider whether the rigid doctrines built around Jesus have actually helped people become more compassionate and courageous.
Or if those doctrines have maybe served the self-preservation of religious institutions instead.
Exactly.
Now, if you've studied theology, you are probably screaming at your device right now about the Council of Nicaea, the early church fathers, and centuries of established dogma.
Oh, for sure. We hear you.
We hear you, yeah. But for the sake of this deep dive, we're just going to step inside Palmer's thought experiment to see exactly where he takes it.
Right, just to follow the thread.
So we start right at the genesis of this crisis, that opening claim, where Jesus says he never taught that he was the second person of a divine Godhead.
The big claim.
Yeah, and in Palmer's text, an evangelical pastor immediately stands up highly defensive and just starts quoting scripture.
Which is exactly what you'd expect.
Right. He says, wait, you said I and the Father are one.
Ah, the classic defense.
Yep. And the character of Jesus pushes back, making a very distinct separation between the concept of unity and the concept of identity.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is central to the whole argument.
Oh, wait, that's my line. Okay, let's unpack this.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's fine. So the source uses a metaphor to explain this that really clarifies Palmer's angle. It suggests that when light shines through a window, you don't worship the window as the sun.
That is a great analogy.
Right. The window is the vessel allowing you to experience the warmth and the light. Palmer is arguing that by turning Jesus into the sun itself, rather than the clearest window for the divine light, traditional theology totally flips the script.
He points out that being united with someone in purpose or in love or in spirit is fundamentally different from being the exact same entity.
Right, right.
In the text, Jesus actually asks the leaders, "When I prayed that my followers might also become one as I was one with the Father, did you conclude that they would all become the same being as God?"
Which, obviously, the answer to that is no.
Exactly, no. But Palmer's argument is that historically, the title Son of God was interpreted by the church as this exclusive, almost biological-sounding species.
A category of exactly one.
Precisely. Palmer suggests it was originally meant to describe a deep, trusting relationship that is actually available to all of humanity, rather than some exclusive divine status.
And he proposes that elevating Jesus to an unreachable divine status might actually lower the perceived potential of humanity.
Yes, and that is the exact psychological mechanism Palmer is trying to expose here.
The ontology thing.
Right, we need to talk about ontology. If Jesus is fundamentally ontologically different from you and me, meaning he is literally made of different divine stuff.
Like supernatural DNA or something.
Yeah, exactly. Then his compassion, his radical forgiveness, his courage in the face of death, all of it becomes supernatural.
Which means it's out of reach for us.
By definition, yeah. It becomes impossible for ordinary people to replicate. Palmer argues this gives humanity a built-in psychological excuse.
Like a loophole.
Totally. People can say, well, of course he forgave his enemies. He was God. I'm just human, so I get to hold on to my anger.
Oh, wow. That's a strong point.
Right. From this viewpoint, traditional theology turns his life into an object of admiration rather than a realistic model for actual human imitation.
Wait, I need to challenge this on behalf of the listener, though.
Go for it.
If Palmer is saying Jesus wasn't divine in a unique sense, doesn't that reduce Christianity to just, like, a generic self-help philosophy?
That's a fair question.
I mean, if Jesus is just a guy who figured out how to be a really clear window, and there are no firm boundaries around who he is, doesn't the faith just dissolve into try to be a good person?
And that is the exact tension Palmer is playing with. The traditional view would argue that without the unique divinity of Christ, the power of salvation is just lost.
Right, the whole mechanism falls apart.
But Palmer counters that defining Jesus exclusively by his divinity actually strips his human choices of their power.
How so?
Well, if he had no choice but to be perfect because he was God, his sacrifices actually mean less than if he were a fully human person who actively chose radical love over fear in every single moment.
Ah, I see. So it's about agency.
Exactly. Palmer isn't saying the faith dissolves. He's suggesting the faith shifts from intellectual agreement about Jesus' cosmic identity to the much harder work of mirroring his actual behavior.
Which naturally leads us to the next phase of Palmer's critique.
Right, the institutions.
Because if Jesus didn't teach these very rigid metaphysical definitions of his own divinity, where did they come from?
Right. Who made the rules?
Exactly. And why did they become a mandatory test for whether or not a person is considered saved?
To explore this, the author sets up a second conversation in the thought experiment.
Yeah, shift the scene here.
This time, Jesus is sitting with a Catholic cardinal, an Eastern Orthodox bishop, and several theologians. And behind them, on a massive screen, are the words, "One God, three persons."
Which represents the doctrine of the Trinity.
Right. Palmer uses this scene to really launch a critique on how the early church evolved. He points out that the earliest Jesus movement was incredibly diverse in its thinking.
Lots of different viewpoints initially.
Lots. But over time, particularly under the influence of Roman emperors like Constantine, councils of men gathered to create a highly specific, unified theological framework.
Right, because an empire needs a unified religion to maintain a unified populace. I mean, you can't have people arguing in the streets about the nature of the cosmos when you are trying to run Rome.
What's fascinating here is how Palmer analyzes the sociology of institutions. He suggests that doctrines like the Trinity didn't just solve theological debates.
They satisfied institutional needs for control.
Exactly. Palmer's critique is that these councils created doctrines to settle debates and create order. But eventually, the institution began treating that framework as though rejecting the framework meant rejecting God entirely.
But wait, pushing back again here, don't communities actually need rules and boundaries just to survive?
Sure, structure is important.
Like the source has that analogy. A map is really helpful to guide you, but it becomes dangerous when you insist the map actually is the land.
Yes, the map versus the territory. When an institution takes the infinite, uncontainable mystery of the divine and turns it into a rigid, copyrighted formula, they instantly create insiders and outsiders.
It's gatekeeping.
It gives the leadership the power to gatekeep. Palmer illustrates this in the text with a very dramatic fictional moment.
Oh yeah, the megachurch pastor.
Right. A pastor stands up from the audience in tears and basically confesses the quiet part out loud.
He admits that enforcing correct doctrine is what keeps people inside his church.
Yeah, he realizes in real time that if his congregation truly believed they could experience God directly without needing the institution to translate or approve their theology, they wouldn't need his church anymore.
His whole livelihood depends on that structure.
His authority, his identity. It all depends on people believing that outside of his specific doctrinal framework, there is only darkness.
Wow.
Palmer is asking the reader to consider, did these complex doctrines historically protect the truth of God, or did they protect the monopoly of the church?
That's heavy. So if the institution has established these rigid rules to keep people inside, how do they enforce them on a daily or weekly basis?
That brings us to worship.
Right. According to Palmer, they don't do it through theology lectures. They do it through the experience of modern worship.
Emotional hook.
Which brings us to a part of the source material that looks at how everyday people actually practice their religion. The setting in the text moves to a massive, state-of-the-art megachurch.
Giant screens, full band.
Yeah, smoke machines, professional lighting, the works. The screens read, "Worship Jesus." The music is swelling. Thousands of hands are in the air.
A typical Sunday for millions of people.
Exactly. But Jesus is standing in the aisle, totally ignoring the stage.
Just watching.
Yeah. The music slowly grinds to a halt in confusion, and Jesus just looks around the room and asks, "Why are you singing to me?"
Which is a deeply disruptive question to modern religious culture.
Here's where it gets really interesting. In the story, the pastor replies, "Because we love you."
And Jesus follows up by asking, and what does your love ask of you?
Right. The pastor talks about honoring him, lifting his name high, declaring his majesty.
And Jesus points out that they have spent infinitely more time practicing singing to him than they have ever spent practicing following him.
Yeah, Palmer is pointing out what he sees as a massive loophole in modern religious practice.
The worship loophole.
He argues that worship can act as an emotional pressure valve. It makes people feel incredibly faithful without requiring them to change their actual behavior.
You get the feeling of being transformed without the work.
Exactly. You can sing a very moving song about surrender, feel a huge rush of dopamine, cry real tears, and then walk out to the parking lot and be completely ruthless to your coworkers the next morning.
Palmer suggests this system produces the emotional sensation of repentance without requiring any actual change in direction.
Which ties back to the divine exception we touched on earlier.
It does.
Yeah.
And he shows how it plays out in daily life. Palmer highlights this by having Jesus confront a prosperity gospel preacher in this scene.
The guys with the private jets.
Right. The preacher has built an empire promising his congregation victory, financial wealth, and political favor in Jesus' name.
But the character of Jesus points out that his actual historical life brought him fierce opposition, poverty, rejection by religious elites, and ultimately execution.
Palmer uses this to ask why institutions use Jesus' name to promise exactly the kind of comfortable, powerful life that the historical Jesus actively rejected.
There is another really specific example in this section of the text that stuck out to me.
The young man.
Yes, a young man in the audience stands up and says, "I worship you every single week, but I still hate my father. He abandoned our family."
A very real, raw confession.
And Jesus tells him that his intense worship might actually be acting as a shield. It might be holding pain he hasn't actually faced.
Well,
Like singing a song on Sunday morning cannot do the hard, quiet work of forgiving his father for him.
Palmer is really challenging the reader here to consider whether public devotion, and this applies outside of religion too, just in how we publicly project our moral values.
Oh, for sure. Performative morality.
Exactly. Whether it sometimes masks a refusal to do internal work. If a congregation praises Jesus for feeding the poor, but the members hoard their own wealth, Palmer asks what the praise has actually accomplished.
It allows people to feel aligned with goodness without having to sacrifice anything to achieve it.
According to the text, the institution learned to love Jesus in a way that no longer required Christians to become like him.
That is a profoundly challenging concept. Loved him in a way that no longer required them to become like him.
It hits hard.
It really does. So if we follow Palmer's logic, if engaging with the divine means actual difficult transformation and love, rather than just singing emotional songs or agreeing on a theological checklist.
Then who is actually in?
Right. The next logical question is, who makes up this community? If doctrine isn't the boundary line, who actually belongs to God?
Palmer takes this question head-on by moving the thought experiment completely away from the cathedrals and the megachurches.
Completely different vibe.
Totally. The final setting is just a normal public school gymnasium. There are folding chairs, basketball hoops, and children's drawings taped to the cinder block walls.
And one of those drawings by a child features a huge, messy circle holding hands, representing wildly diverse people, and in crayon it says, We all belong to God.
And in Palmer's narrative, the religious scholars in the room are extremely uncomfortable with that child's drawing.
Because it breaks the rules.
Right, because traditional Orthodox doctrine insists that humanity is separated from God by nature, and you have to be formally adopted into God's family through correct belief and institutional rituals.
But Jesus defends the child's drawing.
He points out that when he taught his followers to pray Our Father, or when he talked about God making the sun rise on the evil and the good indiscriminately, he was not describing a deity who only cares for the card-carrying members of one specific religion.
Palmer includes a very specific interaction here to drive this home. A young gay woman stands up in the gymnasium.
Yeah, this part is very powerful.
She shares that her former church told her that God had withdrawn his belonging because of her sexual orientation. She had spent years believing she was spiritually orphaned by the creator of the universe.
And Jesus' response in the text is designed to completely paradigm shift the religious leaders.
He essentially says that belonging always precedes correction or growth.
Yes, even if a parent strongly disagrees with a child's path, a truly loving parent doesn't look at their kid and say, "You misunderstood my rules, therefore your birth certificate is void and you are no longer my child."
Palmer is drawing a sharp line here between fear-based religious compliance and love-based spiritual growth.
Exactly. A fear-based system says you must change your behavior and your beliefs so that God will accept you.
While the inherent belonging that Palmer describes says, because you are already permanently held within the divine, you can finally feel safe enough to face what is broken in your life.
He is asserting that no human institution ever granted you your place in the universe, and therefore no human institution had the authority to revoke it.
Which totally democratizes the concept of the divine. And it brings us to a moment in the text that features a very diverse crowd. It's not just Christians in the gym anymore. The audience includes a Muslim teacher, a Jewish rabbi, a Buddhist nun, and an atheist human rights advocate.
A real cross-section of humanity.
Yeah, and Jesus challenges the Christian leaders to look at them, not as targets for conversion, not as mission fields with a deficit of truth, but as people who already possess the divine reality.
And this is where Palmer brings in the philosophy of Meister Eckhart, a mystic from the Middle Ages.
Right, and Eckhart is vital to understanding this shift, right?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, yes, Eckhart is key. We should explain how Eckhart's theology actually worked, because it directly supports Palmer's premise.
Go ahead.
Eckhart taught about something called the divine spark, or the ground of the soul. He believed there was a part of the human soul that was uncreated and eternal.
A piece of God already residing permanently inside every human being.
Exactly. Which, as you can imagine, made the medieval church incredibly angry.
Oh, I'm sure they were furious.
They were. The medieval church eventually condemned some of Eckhart's teachings, precisely because his mechanism bypassed their entire business model.
Right. If the divine spark is already pre-installed in your soul, and you can access God just by turning inward,
you don't necessarily need a priest, a sacrament, or a doctrinal checklist to mediate that connection for you.
the institution loses its monopoly on salvation.
Exactly. Palmer uses Eckhart to argue that the truth isn't something a church imports into a person. It is something a person discovers within themselves.
But wait, I have to push back here again. Let's look at the mechanics of this.
Okay.
If Palmer is right, and everyone, the Muslim, the Buddhist, the atheist, already has this divine spark and is already a child of God, doesn't that make the entire Christian religion functionally obsolete?
That's a huge question.
Right. What is the point of gathering, building churches, or having a faith community at all if it's not acting as the exclusive gatekeeper to heaven? How does a religion even survive if it removes the existential threat of hell?
It is a massive structural question. How do communities organize without fear?
Yeah, how do they?
Palmer suggests that the religion doesn't disappear. Rather, its operational mechanics and its mission fundamentally change.
Okay, so a pivot.
Right. If a church is no longer a gatekeeper deciding who gets to go to God, it becomes a community dedicated to helping people remember that they are already there.
So the motivation shifts from saving souls from a fiery afterlife to mutual aid and shared values in the present.
Exactly. Think about how that changes the mechanics of evangelism. In the traditional model, you show up to another culture, assuming you possess the absolute truth, and they have a deficit.
It is inherently hierarchical.
It is. But in Palmer's model, evangelism becomes a mutual dialogue. You show up to listen, you ask the atheist or the Buddhist where they have experienced deep love, what injustices have broken their hearts, and what wisdom their traditions carry.
You arrive as a guest at their table, not as the authority demanding they sit at yours.
Correct. You can still share how the teachings of Jesus challenged you, or how a specific practice of forgiveness freed you from your own anger.
But you offer it as a gift, not a threat.
Palmer argues that a gift ceases to be a gift. The moment refusing it is met with the threat of eternal damnation.
That makes total sense.
Under this framework, the church survives not by threatening people into the pews, but by becoming a place that practices radical love, protects the vulnerable, and tells the truth. It organizes around shared human flourishing rather than obsessing over its own market share of saved souls.
Man, we have gone on a very deep journey today through Jim Palmer's thought experiment.
We really have.
We started by exploring the massive implications of questioning the 2,000-year-old claim of exclusive divinity. Like, what if Jesus was demonstrating human potential rather than demanding divine worship?
The total paradigm shift.
Yeah, we looked at the historical architecture of doctrines like the Trinity, examining the theory that they often served the power and control of empires and institutions rather than the spiritual growth of individuals.
The map versus the land.
Exactly. We analyzed the psychological trap of the worship loophole, looking at how singing songs can become a convenient emotional excuse to avoid the hard work of actual behavioral transformation.
Which is a tough pill to swallow for a lot of modern churches.
For sure. And finally, we explored Palmer's vision of a universal family, reimagining the mechanics of a faith that operates on inherent belonging rather than the fear of exclusion.
Palmer's text presents a vision of spirituality that asks people to surrender the comfort of absolute certainty in exchange for the vulnerability of genuine connection.
Beautifully put.
It is a proposition that asks humanity to stop using theological beliefs to build walls and to start using our shared divine spark to build a longer table. It is a reminder that possessing a rigid, perfectly memorized sentence about God is not the same thing as actually possessing love in your daily life.
So what does this all mean, bringing this all the way back to you listening right now?
Yeah, how does it apply?
I want to leave you with a thought that steps out of the abstract theology and right into your reality today. If divine belonging isn't some exclusive VIP club that you have to earn through perfect theological agreement or flawless moral behavior,
Right.
if you are already inherently worthy, already deeply held by the universe just by virtue of existing, how does that change the way you judge yourself when you look in the mirror?
That's the real question.
If you don't have to perform to earn your basic right to exist and be loved in this world, what would you finally feel free to change about your life today? Take that thought with you. We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.